Hi, everyone. I am Olivia Norman from AMPU, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Tom McKinney, who is a very well-established vocal coach in Houston, Texas. Tom McKinney is one of our partners here at AMPU, and we wanted to take this time to spotlight him and just let him know how thankful we are and share with our audience what he does. Tom, thank you so much for joining me today. To start off, could you just tell me a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the music industry and got into vocal coaching?
Absolutely. Good morning to you, Olivia. I started singing when I was about 7 years old. And my first voice teacher was a minister of music in a church that I attended in my hometown of Lufkin. And just as a side note, we have been collaborative and friends for a long, long time. He's now 91 years old, and he now takes voice lessons from me, which he's a real pain when I ask him to do things. But that was the sort of my first introduction into vocal music. I was a trumpet player for about 25 years. I had the privilege of being in President Kennedy's White House Staff Navy Band when I joined the Navy and was stationed in Washington, D.C. briefly. And then after that, I went overseas, and my first station to play was in Vietnam. But it was early on, so I spent 4 years in the Navy. And after getting out of the Navy, I came back to Houston and was not sure what I really wanted to do, but there was a place here in Houston that was called the old Galleria Opera House. And I went down and auditioned as a singing waiter. And that's one of the ways that I got to be into the music business after the Navy. And it was through that opportunity that I ended up in Los Angeles singing in Busch Gardens. And so I met my now still voice teacher, a fellow by the name of Seth Riggs, who is in California, who has taught everybody from Michael Jackson to, Whoopi Goldberg, but I'm not sure that that's the best, but also Stevie Wonder, and so many of the artists that came along in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I met him in '69, and it was a funny thing that he told me. He said, "Tom, when you finish your performing career, you should be a teacher." And I laughed and I said, "Oh, no, I don't think I'm ever going to be a teacher." But make a long story short, I performed for 40 years, both in musical theater and for a brief, for a brief stint with the Metropolitan Opera, and then in Europe for 7 years. And during all of that time, the technique that Seth taught me and his teacher, Keith Davis, in New York, who I also studied with, both of them told me at some point when you get to the end of your performance career, you ought to think about becoming a teacher. And I kept saying, no, 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 no. I got to the end of my performance career after 40 years and said, now what am I going to do? And my wife reminded, well, do you remember what Keith and Seth said? You ought to become a teacher. And so I did. I became a teacher in Florida in 1997, I guess it was, and then moved back here to Houston and been here since 1999. And it was only a brief time after that that I met Matthew Knowles, because he asked me, he knew that I had studied with the same teacher that Beyonce's at the time teacher had studied with. And he said, well, can you come down and do some work here? Well, I certainly said, you bet, I'll be there in a minute. And from that point, I was able to work with a lot of great stars. And I also had a studio in Dallas where I had the privilege of working with Demi Lovato when she was 12 and 13. And also with, let's see, who else was out of Dallas? Pentatonix, the lead singer of Pentatonix, Scott Hoying studied with me for about 10 years. And we still collaborate along the line. So that in very brief form is how I got to be where I am. And I finally looked back and said, well, I guess they were right. I do need to be a voice teacher. And that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years.
That's awesome. And it's really cool how you got to be on both sides, you know, the performance side and now the coaching side. I mean, it sounds like your career has taken you all over the world. That's really awesome.
It has. I've been in Europe. I've been in Asia. I've been all over the world as both a pop singer, or I shouldn't say pop singer, a musical theater singer, and also an opera. So that took me around the world several times. And now I'm glad that I'm not having to travel anymore.
Exactly. So, as a coach, what are some of the biggest challenges your singers face when you're developing their voice? And then what are some of the biggest challenges you face when coaching?
I guess the biggest challenge that I face is when people come in and let's name number one is if they are having pitch issues. That becomes a very difficult thing if I'm having to sit there and sit down and plunk out the notes and have them sing. That does not really bode well for being able to teach unless I find within the scope of our initial lessons that they have an ear for it and just somehow or other have gotten disconnected from what they can do and what they don't do. That's one of the things. And then the biggest issue with most singers is either breath, the break in the voice, range, and staying healthy to be able to sustain a career as it takes on now. If you're doing things like Beyonce, who is traveling, in her early days, town to town to town, and having to do 15 to 16 to 20 songs a night, and the same thing with musical theater that are doing 8 shows a week, stamina becomes a huge issue. But I find in terms of what singers mostly have a problem with is breath support. And breath support comes in many fashions. For example, I see when I work with a young singer, I ask them to take a deep breath and they will go, raise their shoulders and bring the chest up and all that sort of stuff. And that's absolutely antithetical to what your lungs do, which is when you take a breath, the lungs expand out and down. And if you're doing this, you're going against what your lungs are doing. So I teach a technique where I have them gently hold their stomach out against the breath for a brief period of time to get them used to not having to pull in. It's not, singing is not weightlifting. And so people grab a high note and go, and they tighten up everything. And so we work with that first of all. And then we talk about the break. The break in the voice is where the voice flips between chest and falsetto. Now, when we work through that, and we spend a fair amount of time working through those 5 to 7 notes that are the break in everybody's voice. The only person I ever knew that didn't have a break in their voice from birth was my goodness, most famous name, Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand, I think, came out of the womb singing, people who need people. So she didn't have a break. No one going to smack that one. I had a chance to sit in on a lesson with her, or sit outside the door of the lesson she studied with my teacher briefly in California. An amazing, amazing singer. But and also then the extension of range, in both directions, both low voice and high voice. Those are the things that most people are looking for when they come to a voice teacher. And some of them say, I don't know what I need, but I know I need something. So that's when the investigative process begins. And we go through a series of exercises, which exposes whatever they may or may not have as a problem. Most people, the problem is more imagined than real. And once we address a system or a way to approach that problem, most things disappear very quickly. I have a code in my studio that I will guarantee a full octave and extension of their range within 4 lessons. And if they don't, I give them their money back. And I've never given anybody's money back.
That's awesome. So are the clients that you work with usually just starting off their music careers, or are they a little bit more established, or do you see both?
I see both. Over the last few years, my clientele has ranged from 10 years old to, into their 80s. I've had I've had students that long. But of late, fortunately or unfortunately, we have more adult singers. And especially when we've been dealing with this pandemic, people are really reassessing where their careers are at this point and saying, I've always wanted to do something in music. So I have plastic surgeons, I have attorneys, I have CPAs, I have people that are firmly established in their careers and saying, I want to do music. And so I have a lot of adult students that are now taking voice lessons, and I'm really enjoying that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome that, one of the silver linings for everything is people realizing that it's never too late to go after your dreams and do what you love. So that's really
Absolutely.
uplifting to hear. So in your opinion, what is the most important skill a singer can develop? Maybe one of the skills you just mentioned, but like what is something that sets one singer apart from the rest?
I think it is a complete and total understanding that they do have a gift worthy of a career. That's the biggest thing that I think that the people say, well, I don't know whether I'm good enough or I'm this or that. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, you're already putting up roadblocks before you even start out. So one of the best things that I can do for a student is give them a sense of self-confidence. And that self-confidence comes from learning the technique, being able to employ that technique with their singing, and then being able to sing any and everything they want to sing. It doesn't matter what the genre is. It's just a matter of them taking a hold of their particular voice. The one thing that is most maddening to me, people come in and say, well, I want to be the next Beyonce. I've got a sign that says, be yourself, everybody else is already taken. So I say that, I said, don't try to be somebody else. Make your own unique path. And that's what we try to discover here in the studio. What is that unique path? Sound or style or both of a singer's abilities. And we work on that. And I encourage everyone, and this is the reason I've been associated with AmpU for quite some time, is for having songwriters, being a songwriter. Most people come in without any idea that they have any kind of an ability along those lines at all. And you get them with some people like we'll work with Jake. They find that they do have a story to tell, and it can be done in song. And so that's one of the things that we encourage here, and that's why I send a lot of my students. I don't do that. I work strictly with the vocal technique. When you open your mouth, we hope that the sound you want to come out comes out. So that's my job. And after that's reached, I send them to people like Jake and the people that he works with who are songwriters who help develop those talents as well.
That's so cool, and it's great to hear that half the battle is just thinking you can make it, and that's really what it takes. So at the beginning of the interview, you spoke to some of the names of the people you've worked with, lead singer of the Pentatonix, Mario. What has it been like to work with those names and see them, go on to success? And have you had any interesting stories that have come out of those relationships?
Well, I guess one of the most interesting stories is that the longest association has been with Scott Hoying, who put together Pentatonix. Pentatonix, he studied me for almost 10 years through his junior high and high school years, and then he went off to college, and then he won the competition of the competition where a cappella singers was, and he won that thing. And of course, the rest is history. They are the most successful a cappella group in history. I think I'm safe in saying that, at least in modern history. Scott was one of those wonderful students that he absorbed everything that we talked about, that we did. And then he also asked questions. And that's another thing that I really ask my students to do. I said, don't just blanketly accept what I say. If a question at all arises, ask me. It's your career. I've already had my career. So I want you to have the tools that you need to be able to do what you say you want to do as a performer. Another thing that we talk about a lot is, and we've heard the old expression, a deer caught in the headlights, just standing there, I'm going to sing for you now, thank you very much. And you think, well, if you don't learn to animate that which you do, singing wise, you're not going to have a very big career. And I think one of the biggest issues post the vocal technique that you do is being able to express with your entire being what you're singing about. If you can't do that, then you're going to be a fairly dull, there are some exceptions to that, what's his name, Taylor, been a long time, he just sits on the guitar, and there are several guys that just sit on the guitar and they don't do much, but they still are very effective. But the ones that you really, really think about, look, Beyonce doesn't have an unstilled bone in her body. I mean, when she is animated, that young lady is animated. The same thing with Demi. The same thing with the other singers that I work with. Again, I go back to Scott Hoying. Ray J was with me for a while, and Mario is a wonderful singer. He's had a resurgence lately. Very, very animated in their abilities to convey a feeling about a song, not only vocally but visually, animation.
It's so interesting to hear all of the small things you have to think about when being a singer, and you know how valuable a vocal coach is to help you work through all of these things.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think one of the biggest issue, because a lot of people come in with wonderful potentiality in their voices, but they haven't discovered for themselves that there is an absolute need for being able to animate what they do. And I am very fortunate that I have been married to a woman for 43 years who is an ex-Broadway singer, dancer, actress, and she is excellent in helping people to find the animation that they need from a standpoint of just if they're a concert artist or wherever. You know, there's a young man here who is a Texas singer by the name of Will Carter. That when he first came to me, he was not very animated, and he's worked with. Will's been a student of ours, and I say that Colleen's and mine for the past 11 years. And now he's one of the top Texas country music artists in Texas. So that's always been a point of pride for me, that we've found people who have found their niche in the music industry.
Yeah. Well, so just my last question for today is something that I was just personally curious about. And that is, if you think the majority of artists who have made it big today, you know, on the top 100 charts, on the radio, that type of thing, are truly excellent vocalists. And as well, who do you think are some of the top vocalists of today's generation?
Well, one of the top female artists that I have ever heard is Tori Kelly. I mean, that youngin can do just about anything. She has, of course, Ariana Grande and Demi and people like that. But I'm talking about people that have a pure raw talent for the vocals and also their animation on stage. They I think are just incredibly good. Well, and of course, some of the guy singers. Mario is very good at animating his material. I'm trying to think of who I think is Daughtry, the guy from American Idol.
Chris Daughtry.
Yeah, that dude can make you come alive with his singing. I wish I'd have taught him. I didn't, but I can be a great admirer of him. And someone who has evolved over the years is Taylor Swift. When she first started, she wasn't a great vocalist. She was an okay vocalist, and she really didn't do much with what she was doing. But look how she's evolved into this incredibly proficient and wonderful singer. And changing genres, that's not done often at all. From country to pop, good for her. Good for her.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the interview, or any, last advice you would have for aspiring vocalists?
Well, first of all, if you're a vocalist and you really want to learn your voice, the name of the technique that I teach is called Sing with the Ease of Speech. And I mean that quite literally, that if you speak well and learn to support your speaking voice, you can sing well. And then I want to also thank my collaborator and friend for all these many years, Jake McKim and AmpU, that they have done so well. And you guys are continuing to grow and prosper and help people at least have a chance to achieve the goal of their life, which is become a professional singer.
Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure that once this video is posted that we have the link to your website, and if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to me and I can pass them along to you. But again, just thank you so much, one, for sitting down with me today, and then on behalf of AmpU for being one of our great partners, and for always supporting us and having this mutual relationship. We wouldn't be where we are without you today, and just wanted to take this opportunity to tell you how grateful we are.
Olivia, I thank you. My best to Jake and the rest of the team at AmpU, and we'll look forward to a long and fruitful continuing future.
Sounds good. You have a great rest of your day.
You too, dear. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.